The book is called School and Schooled, A Flight Plan for Life and an All-American Story of Hard Work and Success. And Frank Donahue, the author, writes, in the USA there are around 1 million lawyers and around 900,000 doctors, but there are only about 100,000 airline pilots. Frank Donahue, you have flown for 33 years, 27 of which have been with FedEx. What's it like being up in the cockpit? What do you do with your time? How scary is it? Talk to us about being an airline pilot.
Well, Joe, when nothing's going wrong, it's like a walk in a park. It's very easy. But you know, sometimes there's weather we have to deal with. There's mechanical, something breaks in the plane. There's deviations. With FedEx, unlike a passenger carrier, sometimes our company will call us up and say, hey Frank, we need you to drop into another airport. There's some extra freight. We need you to pick it up, bring it there. So there's a lot of unpredictabilities.
You mentioned you devoted a whole chapter to one particular flight. Why was that, and what's that about?
Oh, Flight 1340, yes, that's a favorite amongst readers. It's a flight that takes off at JFK International Airport and goes to Memphis. And when you get in the airplane, it's like you're sitting up there in the cockpit. It's like you're sitting right behind me, and you get into like the mind of an airline pilot. We talk about, you know, the systems that we have to check, the fuel. There's this constant battle between time and fuel. You know, we want to go fast to get the freight there, but we don't go too fast to burn the fuel. And then we talk about things we see in the air, like the northern lights and clouds, other aircraft. It's a very interesting view. It actually was the perfect flight going into Memphis. However, the flight didn't end so perfectly.
What happened?
There was a mechanical. We had to declare an emergency. We had a flat malfunction, and when you declare an emergency, the stress level goes up. You know, pressure goes up. I had to assign certain duties to the first officer because, as you know, the captain is responsible for everything. He can break every rule in the book to get the plane on the ground safely. He may have to answer for it later to the Federal Aviation Administration, but you know, he's in charge. He's responsible to get the plane on the ground safely. So we had certain duties we had to do, and I initially gave him the airplane so that I can take care of all these things like the checklist, getting us alternate holding instructions and so forth. Well, once everything was under control, around 1,000 feet, I took the plane back because I figured if I'm responsible, I want my hands on the rudder pedals and my hands on the yoke and my feet on the rudder pedals. And we landed safely. And anytime you can land safely on the ground, you know, that's all that matters. You're on the ground, you landed safely.
Because you have a lot of time in the cockpit, is it easy to pull off a book like this because you can spend some time thinking, maybe even writing during those hours?
Well, not really. A lot of times people will walk up in the cockpit and see the pilot and the co-pilot sitting there, and it doesn't really look like they're doing anything. The autopilot's doing everything, right? Well, not really. The pilots have to program the autopilot. The pilots are thinking about the next segment, the weather, what they're doing, so forth. I would say most of this writing and reading and researching I did while I was on the ground on my layovers.
Okay. And what's the difference between the fraternity of cargo pilots versus the fraternity and sororities of, well, I should say sororities of cargo pilots, certainly a lot of female cargo pilots.
That's true.
The difference between the two industries, the two career paths?
Well, the career paths are they're pretty much the same to get to the career paths, but the operations are slightly different. I kind of put it this way. Somebody says to me, you know, how fast are you going? And I always say 600 miles an hour, and sometimes that's true. Because most people know about a car on a highway when they're driving. They know what 60 miles an hour is. So, you know, we're going 10 times faster. So I tried to explain to them, flying passengers and flying cargo is kind of like your car. If you get in your car and you got a load of passengers with you, you know, do you drive any different than when you come back from the grocery store? Well, maybe if you have a whole bunch of eggs on board, you're driving a little delicately. Maybe if you got a whole bunch of bricks on board, it's kind of heavy, you know, you got to handle it a little differently. Maybe if you have some children in the back, you're a little delicate. Or if you had some adults, you might be, or peers, you might be showing off your driving skills a little bit. But, you know, a car's a car, just like a plane's a plane. Mm-hmm. Whether you're carrying people in the back or cargo in the back, you still want to get safely from A to B.
How did you make the decision to become an airline pilot? Did you come out of military aviation?
Oh, that's funny, Joe. You know, I was 18 years old. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I basically kind of ran away from home. I joined the Air Force. I'm over in England at the Lake Mead Air Force Base, and a good friend of mine, Jeff Scott, says, "Hey, let's go out to the Aero Club." It was April 10th, 1981. I'll tell you how I remember that date. So I went up in an airplane with Simon Dre, my flight instructor, for the very first flight. I loved it. I went back Saturday, took another one. I went back Sunday, took my third flight, 3 flights in a row. I came back to the dorm. I watched on TV the very first Space Shuttle Columbia takeoff,
Wow.
April 12th, 1981. And I said to myself, this is what I want to do. But I had to figure out a plan. I had to get a financial plan, a flight plan. How was I going to get there? I'm still in the military. And that was age 20. 6 years later, I was on a 747. I left JFK. And we went from JFK to Brussels. The next day went to Dubai. The next day went to Hong Kong. The next day went to Tokyo. The next day Anchorage. The next day to JFK. 26 years old, right around the world.
Wow. And you were sold.
I was sold. Hooked on flying.
Yeah. Well, the book will be full of great, interesting stories to tell. And then the neat thing is how you shift gears and you get into, self-help chapters. Let's start off with those because they're fascinating. And you're a family man, and you give great advice on being a part of a family and raising a family.
It's true. As you know, all children are different. Some are easy to raise, some are a little bit more challenging. And I talk about, some things that will work raising your children, like discipline and loving and spending as much time with them, because your son's not going to remember, the $45 mitt. They're going to remember you playing ball with them.
Yeah.
And I one child was a little challenging. I had to come up with contracts. I have a driving contract, a high school contract, and a college contract. So, maybe these contracts will work for you.
Another chapter on money. What's your advice on money minded?
Yeah, I've been poor and broke, had nothing to eat, and sweaty, and it does feel good to have money with you. And I've met some people that have no money and they have the happiest marriages in the world. But I think, you should have some money on you, and maybe you should save enough to live for 6 months. But what I've given in the money chapter, I give a little synopsis on a financial plan that may work for you, It may not, but take a look at it.
And you're a spiritual guy. You have a whole chapter devoted to religious and soul searching.
Oh, Joe, this is a touchy subject, You get in a conflict with another person, and talking politics, it just goes flying around.
Yeah.
And religion's another subject, so sometimes people open up. So what I did in my chapter, I gave a synopsis of all the different religions in the world. And then I came back to talk a little bit about Christianity, because I'm a little bit open-minded to that, just from my research and my open-heartedness. And then I wrote a prayer. There's a prayer in there, and it's a prayer that everybody can use because there's a little section there where you can adjust it to just yourself. So there's a prayer in there for you to use.
And you're health conscious.
Well, we have to be. Every 6 months we have to go to the FAA and get a medical. We don't pass the medical, we don't fly. We don't fly, we don't get to eat. That's not good. So what I did, and I asked my children, when they were teenagers, have you ever noticed teenagers don't want to listen to parents that much? They don't want to listen to you that much. So I figured if I write this now, maybe later on when they mature adults, they'll listen to you. So I wrote the 10 healthy rules. I have 10 healthy rules to take care of the body.
Looking back, would you do everything the same way you've done it? Have you had the time of your life and loved your career?
Yes. I think I do love my career. Of course, with responsibility, comes some rights, enjoyment. But I would do it the same thing again, I enjoyed it very much.
And you're writing about retirement. It's probably something you don't want to look at, but you got to be realistic. Since you enjoy what you do, you hope to keep doing it for a while. But when the day comes to retire, what's your advice on retirement, Frank?
Well, as airline pilots, we have to retire at age 65. And I have opportunity to retire at 55 here in about a year or so, so it's on my mind. I made a deal with God one time. I flew an airplane from Indianapolis to Richmond and landed, went to sleep, woke up, And it was around 10, 11 o'clock, I'm looking at the TV, and I'm going, what is this, some new action film? Oh no, this is the World Trade Center. They blew up the Twin Towers with an airplane. So I made a deal with God. God, let me live long enough to just raise my youngest till he's 18. Oh, Joe, he's well past 18. I sure hope he's not going to collect on that deal. So, yes, there's questions and answers in there for retirement that everybody should ask themselves. And so that's how the book ends, the retirement section.
And just lastly, tell people that are watching this video why you think they would enjoy reading your book.
Number one, I think they would be inspired. At age 20, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I became an airline pilot. So that's inspiration for anybody to pursue what they want to.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they would learn more about what pilots do, you know, the interesting lives they live, some of the interesting places they've been to. And then there's those 4 self-help chapters. I'm sure there's at least one chapter that'll help somebody. And if one chapter helps somebody, then I'm happy.